Hello you lovely lot, welcome back to the Max Goodwin YouTube channel and my predictions for Euro 2020 stroke Euro 2021 if you want to, think about it all being cancelled last year. In this video I'm going to be going through my predictions for each group and then finally my predictions through the knockout stages into the final and overall who I think is going to win the tournament when it starts this Friday the 11th of June in Rome when Italy take on Turkey in Group A, hopefully looking to kick things off in style with loads of goals hopefully and loads of great talking points to get into. Before we get into that though, please don't forget to drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel, turning on notifications so you don't miss a single video. Speaking of which, thank you so much for helping me get to 100 subscribers. We reached that yesterday, which was Monday, so thank you very much again for getting to me that milestone. That was the goal for the entirety of 2021. And somehow we're there already. So again, massive thank you to those who are showing support to the channel at the moment. The next goal is probably going to be like 250 subscribers. I feel like that's the next sort of feasible interval. So if you want to support the channel and help me reach that goal, drop a like and subscribe below is the best way in which you can do so. With all that being said, let's crack into it and get into Group A and start doing some prediction action. Okay then, so hopefully you can see the little graphic that I've got up on the screen. Hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. You've got Group A, B, C, D, E, F, quarterfinals, round of 16, semi-final, that good stuff. We're going to be kicking things off though in Group A, consisting of Italy, Turkey, Switzerland, and Wales. And we're going to be going through a little bit of a profile of each team and then where I think each one's going to finish. So starting off with Italy, very strong team at the moment, qualifying with their manager Roberto Mancini, of course, formerly of Manchester City and Inter Milan. And I would say their strongest area is probably in the midfield, the likes of Jorginho, Lorenzo Pellegrini, Nico Barella, Manuel Locatelli and Marco Verratti in there. Very combative, very creative and very solid midfield. And I would say their player to watch at the moment is probably going to be Nico Barella, one of the best players in Serie A last season. Pretty combative, very much, happy to give away fouls and get yellow cards, but he's also a good dribbler and a decent creator from the base, that midfield. But really you could pick anyone from that midfield as a player to watch. I think they're going to be one of the more exciting teams to watch this tournament. Turkey, of course, are also in there, currently being managed by the man, I should say, who got them to the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2002. And have a good core to their squad with some very interesting talents in there, such as their player who I've named as my player to watch for Turkey, and that is Celik, who is a right back for Lille, obviously coming off the back of a title win with Les Doges, and he's linked at the moment to Manchester United off a bit of competition to Wan-Bissaka or Arsenal as a replacement for Bayern, so maybe a player worth keeping an eye out on. Switzerland have a very talented team at the moment, talented all over the park, decent goalkeeper, decent defence, very solid midfield. Not the most solid up front, don't have too many potent strikers. I think Haris Seferovic will probably be their main source of goals. However, I would say they're still pretty reliant on players such as Xherdan Shaqiri. However, I've gone for their star man, hopefully the player to look out for, as Denis Zakaria from Borussia Mönchengladbach. He has had a fantastic season, injury-laden now it has been. He's been a really good performer for Mönchengladbach, really since he arrived at the club a few years ago. So hopefully a player to watch for Switzerland. And finally, Wales. Less reliant on Gareth Bale at the moment. Always seem to be the one-man show with Wales. And you can maybe say two-man with Aaron Ramsey in there. But they've definitely developed a very cohesive squad since their last outing at Euro 2016 when they reached the semi-finals. Obviously, the likes of David Brooks, Ethan Ampadu, Harry Wilson in that team. I think David Brooks is probably going to be the player to watch in that team. I think he was great when he was in the Premier League with Bournemouth, had a really solid season again with them in the Championship, and could offer them that little bit of a spark that potentially they don't have in the centre of midfield. And so let's get into the table for Group A then. In first place, I've got Italy going through top of the table, Turkey to then go through in second, Switzerland to go in third but to progress through to the round of 16, and finally Wales to finish bottom of the table. It's disappointing to say that. Wales obviously had a great tournament last time out. However, I still think they're one or two players away from being a real contender from getting out of this group, and I just think that sort of solidity-wise, the other teams are a little bit ahead of them at the moment. No disrespect, though, to Wales, who've got a very talented team. Next up, we're going to be moving into Group B, starting off with Belgium. Obviously, a very talented team, one of the favourites for the tournament thus far. Romelu Lukaku, Eden Hazard, Axel Witsel, Yuri Tielemans, the hero from the FA Cup final, of course, and Thibaut Courtois, just to name a few of the very, very talented players in that team at the moment. Still, though, I think they're probably not going to go too far in this tournament. Maybe a semi-final, maybe a quarter-final overall. I think a big part of that is the lack of defensive quality they have at the moment. Still relying on 34-year-old Jan Vertonghen and 32-year-old Toby Alderweireld in defence. Does lean more towards them being a little bit leaky defensively. And I also think Bobby Martinez, although he's done a pretty decent job with this Belgian team, doesn't have the adaptability to create enough of a solid enough defence for them to go too deep. I would say Romelu Lukaku definitely going to be the player for them to look out for, probably the form striker in the world at the moment. Denmark, of course, are next in the group. Strong, physical, good creativity in that team. A very solid spine to that team as well, with Kasper Schmeichel, Simon Kjær, Yannick Vestergaard, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, and Thomas Delaney from Borussia Dortmund. And I think a really good Courtois squad is the base of a very successful team, and I think they'll have a pretty okay tournament this time out. I think obviously Christian Eriksen is going to be the main man for them this time around. Next up is Finland, their first European Championships. Congratulations to them for qualifying. However, they are going to be heavily reliant on Teemu Pukki, of course, who's coming off the back of a very good season for Norwich City, and Lukas Hradecky from by Leverkusen. I think I said that right. Hradecky, something like that. Obviously, Pukki's probably going to be their star man, the player to look out for them. They've got a good core of pretty experienced players, but also some young players in there who I hope could at least give something to show for the Finnish fans. They definitely deserve it. I can't believe they've never qualified for Euros before, considering some of the teams that have been in there in the past. Russia then finish up this group. A very unique team, I would say. Physically strong, creatively pretty decent in certain areas of the pitch. I think it's going to be quite an interesting tournament for Russia. I think it's either going to go really well or really badly. I think that's a pretty expected thing from Russia. Obviously reached the quarterfinals last time out, knocking out Spain in the round of 16. How did they manage that at the World Cup? I think their main man's probably going to be Mario Fernandes, the Brazilian-born right back who currently plays for CSKA Moscow in the Russian league. Has pretty much been their main creative outlet, I would suggest, from right back. Sort of flies in as more of a wing back, with the left-sided fullback more tucking in to create a back three. Been doing a bit of my research from Tifo videos, as you can tell. So I would suggest he's probably going to be their main man, getting crossed into the box for their near 2 metre tall strikers they're taking to the tournament. In the end, I think the tournament group for Group B is probably going to look something like this. Belgium in first, Denmark in second, Russia in third, but progressing as one of the best third place teams, and Finland probably not picking up any points. I don't think that's necessarily too bold a prediction to make. That being said, though, it would be great to see them there, and obviously they've got some pretty interesting players in there who I'm sure will create a bit of a splash. Next up, we have a Group C, kicking things off with Austria. Had a decent performance, although falling to a 1-0 defeat against England last week, and probably one of the more underrated squads in the Euros this summer, including, I think, their star man, Marcel Sabitzer from RB Leipzig. I think he's a pretty talented forward, stroke attacking midfielder. He likes to push up really high and press. Obviously, being from Leipzig, he's a good presser, and I think that's definitely going to benefit this Austria team, which also contains a lot of other talent. You've got Emil Kraft, you've got David Alaba as well in there. And I think the core of a really interesting blend of players. Defensively, although they've got Alaba, probably not that solid, and I think they'll probably lack the firepower to do massive amounts in this group, but I think they'll probably be safe because it's not a particularly difficult group for them to get out of. Next up is the Netherlands. Frank de Boer taking charge of the Netherlands in their first tournament with him in charge. I think it should be interesting to see how he gets on. I don't particularly rate him as a manager. I think, obviously, we saw what he did at Crystal Palace a few years ago. Pretty interesting philosophy, I would say, trying to probably play a bit more of a possession style. But I think the talent in the team at his disposal will probably afford him a few lucky breaks. Memphis Depay, of course, in there. Frankie de Jong, Matthijs de Ligt in there as well. Jorginho Wijnaldum. should be quite interesting to see how they get on. I think De Jong's probably going to be the star man for them. A really good addition to English fans or British fans, I guess, who don't necessarily watch Spanish football on a weekly basis. If you don't watch him that often, it's quite hard to gauge what he is, but I think he's a very talented midfielder. Of course, getting to the semi-finals of the Champions League a few years ago of Ajax. Next up is debutants, not just in European competition, but in world football. North Macedonia, welcome to the big stage, qualifying for their first major tournament thanks to a late goal from Goran Pandev against Georgia in the playoffs. Of course, their first tournament, a great story to see them here, but probably not going to be too much done by them in this tournament. They do have a player called Elmas who plays for Napoli, had a decent season with them this season. It'll be good to see if the young, I think he's like 19 years old, midfielder could maybe do some bits in the midfield and maybe earn himself a move in the summer. Finally, we have the Ukraine in there in the group, a very solid core of the team. Of course, players quite familiar to Premier League fans, Andrei Yarmolenko and Alexander Zinchenko, probably the most familiar to the neutrals, but also some other talented players in there like Marlos from Shakhtar Donetsk, and really perhaps more of a homegrown team. A lot of their players play in the Ukrainian league, which you probably wouldn't, you probably expect. You tend to see that in a lot of the Eastern European countries. It will definitely be interesting to see how they do because of that lack of knowledge some of us may have of some of their players. Of course, I would say the probably player to watch is going to be Alexander Zinchenko, leading out that team. Obviously had a fantastic season, mainly playing at left back for Manchester City. I think he plays kind of a bit all over the place for Ukraine. If you're Ukrainian, please let me know where he plays predominantly for your national team. I know he's an attacking midfielder by trade, so I assume he probably plays somewhere in midfield for the Ukrainians, being one of the more creative players in that team. Overall, as we reach the halfway stage of this video, I think Netherlands are probably going to top this group, with Austria finishing second, Ukraine finishing third, and North Macedonia finishing fourth. I'm not too sure about Ukraine or Austria. That could be either way, maybe a flip of a coin on that one. Either way, I think it'll probably be clearly Netherlands top, North Macedonia bottom, and then one of them to go through in second place. Let's move then on to Group D, the one that I think most of us will probably be having our eyes on, that being because it contains England and Scotland. Firstly, England, a very talented team. Of course, we've seen them in the warm-up games against Austria and against Romania last night. Hopefully, we can see them do a little bit better than they did in those games, not creating too many chances of really high quality. I think a big part of that is because of us not having any Man City, Chelsea, or most of the Man United players in that starting 11, obviously because of their deep European campaigns this season. Having the likes of Phil Foden, Mason Mount, Kyle Walker, and Ben Chilwell back in the squad, just offering something a little bit more in the team, hopefully will just push us over the line in this group. Star player, of course, being Jude Bellingham. Looking forward very much to seeing the young Dortmund midfielder kick on in this European campaign. Don't know why I'm getting so aggressive with that one. Next up, we're going to be talking about Croatia. Still got a lot of the core of that World Cup team, which of course reached the final, falling to France 4-2 in the end. Congratulations to them for doing that, by the way. That was very, very impressive. I think their star player is probably going to be a young man called Josip Brekalo, who plays for Wolfsburg, coming off the back of his 7-goal haul for the Wolfsburg this season. You could obviously say the likes like Mateo Kovacic, Dejan Lovren, Ivan Perisic, people like that obviously are going to be star players for Croatia. But I want to go for someone a little bit different who may get some minutes here and there and could impress, particularly against some of the weak teams in the tournament. Next up, we have Scotland, hopefully looking to have a pretty good tournament. I can't remember the last time Scotland qualified for a tournament. It might have been like Euro 96 when they were also in our group. Good individuals, obviously, on the left-hand side, Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney in that team, probably the star players in that team. But you've also got the likes of Scott McTominay, David Turnbull, and Che Adams from Southampton. I've put down David Turnbull as a star player. If you watch the Sunderland career mode, you know he's done absolute bits for us this season. I think getting like close to 20 goals in the league for us. Obviously, I've got to put him down as a star player. Realistically, it's probably going to be someone like McTominay or Andy Robertson, but obviously having a bit of fun with that one. And finally, we have Czechia, the Czech Republic. They did beat England in qualifying for this tournament, so they do have the ability to beat what is probably one of the contenders for the tournament so far. I think their main man's probably going to be Patrick Schick, coming off the back of a double-digit goal haul for Bayer Leverkusen this season in what was a pretty tumultuous season for them, obviously sacking Peter Bosz and having a couple of caretaker managers in there. Should be interesting to see how they get on. I think they'll definitely pose a threat defensively and from set pieces against pretty much every team in that group as they progress. In terms of the final standings, I'm predicting England to top the table, Croatia to finish second, Scotland to finish third, progressing through as one of the better third place teams, and finally Czechia bottoming out of the table. No disrespect to them, just because I think it's probably going to be, a tough group for them to get out of. Even Scotland have a pretty, solid team, and you could probably argue they're the third best in that group. Although, anything can happen, of course. They beat England in qualifying. Next up, we have Group E, the penultimate group for us to get into. We're going to be kicking things off with Poland, of course, possessing probably the best striker in the world right now in Robert Lewandowski, but not just that, a very talented squad all round, including the man I would say probably to look out for, a man called Jakub Murder, who had a pretty decent spell at the back end of the season for Brighton coming in to the squad. He's a good utility man, can play in defence, can play full-back or in midfield, and I think could offer them a little bit something anywhere in the base of midfield for Poland, hopefully getting some minutes in there, because otherwise I'm going to look pretty silly if he doesn't. I've got him down there as the star player for them, and of course Robert Lewandowski, he's probably going to have a good tournament, I'd imagine. Next up, we have Slovakia. I don't know too much about Slovakia, I will admit. I could probably place it on a map because it's next to the Czech Republic. That's about it. Some good individuals, though, including their star player, Marek Hamšík, still going at like 34 years old for Gothenburg in the Swedish league. Credit to him that he's still knocking about, still hammering them in, and captaining his side to the European Championships this summer. Hopefully they can do a bit, because I think they've got some really interesting players in there. Milan Skriniar as well in there. Hopefully, should be interesting to see how they get on. Penultimate team in this group is Spain, obviously probably one of the more complete teams in the entire tournament, I would suggest. Probably one of the favourites as well, with probably a bit of a shout, probably the best manager in the tournament, Luis Enrique. I don't think that's too controversial, actually, to say he's probably the best manager in the tournament. I would say, though, the lack of leadership in that team, particularly with Sergio Ramos missing out because of the lack of players in that squad. He only went for the 23 out of 26, which is pretty interesting, including no Real Madrid players. I think that lack of leadership from players like Ramos could potentially cost them as we get deeper in the tournament, although I think they'll probably breeze through this group pretty easily. Stay tuned for Pedri and Ferran Torres as well. I think they're going to be star players in this group, possibly even contenders for team of the tournament or like young player of the tournament or whatever. I think they're going to have pretty good campaigns over the course of the month. And finally, we round things up with Sweden, a very good, solid defensive team with some good, interesting, creative players in there, including Emil Forsberg from RB Leipzig, and my personal star player for their team, Alexander Isaac from Sociedad, coming off the back of 17 goals in the league this season for Sociedad, and I think a quarter-final in the Europa League. Was it quarter-final? Yeah, quarter-final, where they lost to Manchester United, of course. Wasn't too potent in that game, so probably didn't give himself the best account for himself, but he's got some good goals in him, and probably their main goal threat if they're looking to get out of the group this tournament. Overall, I've gone for Spain to top the group, Sweden to finish second, Poland to finish third, and Slovakia to finish fourth, bottoming out the table. I probably should have been a few goals. Not good for them. Let's move then into our final group, that being, I think for many people, the group of death in this tournament. Definitely going to be the most interesting one. France, Portugal, Germany and Hungary. Let's kick things off with France. Obviously, I think they're still the bookies' favourites for the tournament at the moment, ahead of England, so probably going to be topping this group. Overall, I would say that's not a particularly bold prediction to make. And obviously the star players they've got in there, Kylian Mbappe, N'Golo Kante, Paul Pogba, Hugo Lloris, Rafa Varane. Obviously they've got a very talented team. I've actually gone for their star breakout player to be Marcus Thuram. He's coming off the back of 2 back-to-back double-digit goal seasons for Borussia Mönchengladbach this season and last season. So he's got goals in him. I don't think he'll get too many minutes, but I think against potentially Hungary later in the group stages, maybe even in the knockout stages for a bit of rotation, he could perhaps see some minutes down the line. I just wanted to go for someone a bit different, basically, other than like Kante, Pogba, or Mbappe, or Griezmann or Giroud or something, who obviously are going to be very, very important to France, probably going very deep in this tournament. We'll get into that in a little bit, though. Next up, we got Portugal. It's always been the one-man show with Portugal, hasn't it, with Ronaldo? But now I think this is definitely the most complete Portugal squad for a very, very long time. Obviously, you've got the likes of João Cancelo in there, Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, of course, Ruben Dias, my personal PFA Premier League Player of the Year this season. But I think their potential player to watch could be Pedro Gonzalez from Sporting Lisbon, helping the team reach a league title this season, scoring 23 goals from midfield in the process. Seems to be very much in the mould of Bruno Fernandes, and whilst I don't think he's going to be usurping Bruno in the midfield for this tournament, he might get some minutes down the line in the tournament, particularly as a substitute as the game goes on with quite an intense pressing team going out, and I think he could definitely make an impact and maybe even earn a move later in the summer. Okay, then let's move into the next team, that being Germany. Definitely a team in transition. I don't think they're going to go massively deep in this tournament. Obviously, we know that Jürgen Löw is going to be leaving the team at the end of this tournament, with Hansi Flick coming in for the next spell, leaning into the next World Cup. And I think a big part of that is because of basically this being a transitional period for Germany, having a good Euro 2016, obviously won the World Cup in 2014, didn't do too well in the World Cup in 2018, but if you look back, historically a very consistent, good performing team that usually goes to at least the quarterfinals. World Cup obviously last time being excluded from that. I think likely going to go fairly deep in the tournament, maybe not to the final, but fairly deep, I would say. And I think their star player is going to be Kai Havertz, coming off the back of that goal in the Champions League final, of course, against Manchester City, helping Chelsea win their second UCL title. And I think with that, gives them a bit of form, gives them a bit of confidence. Had a good end to the season as well under Thomas Tuchel, so it should be interesting to see how the Chelsea forward adapts to international football. And finally, we have Hungary. Hungary, I'm afraid, are not going to be doing too much in this group, I don't think. Good for them that they made it here, of course. And actually, to be fair, some very talented individuals who I'll get into in a second. It could be a tough ride for them, obviously going against the current world champions, the current European champions, and the world champions from 6 years ago. So could be interesting for them. They do have some interesting individuals in there, though. Willi Orban, of course, of Leipzig, and Petr Gulácsi, his club and international teammate, of course, formerly of Liverpool as well. I've gone for their star player, though, to be Dominik Szoboszlai from RB Leipzig. Szoboszlai. You know what I mean? The guy who is linked to Arsenal perennially over the last year or so. Joined them from Salzburg in the winter window. Has had a good start to his Leipzig career. And possibly the next big thing coming out of Hungarian football. I mean, they've got a good contingent of Hungarian RB Leipzig players in there, obviously with Gulácsi and Orban in there as well. Should be interesting to see how they get on. I don't think it's going to be that great of a tournament for them, though. Speaking of which, this is the final predictions for their group. France to top it, Portugal to come second, Germany to progress in third as one of the better third place teams, and finally Hungary to bottom out the group. Now then, we have the little task ahead of us of getting into some knockout stages. We're going to be starting off in the round of 16 with 8 fixtures. 8 fixtures? 4 fixtures? 8 fixtures, yeah, that's the right number. 8 fixtures, which will see 8 teams obviously progress through to the quarterfinals, etc, etc. So firstly, our first game is top of Group B versus third in Group D, which is Belgium v Scotland. I have Belgium going through in that one. Next up is top of Group A versus second in Group B, Italy v Austria. I have Italy winning that game. Next up is top of Group E versus third of Group A, with Spain progressing against Switzerland. And then we next have top of Group D, taking on the second in Group F, which was England versus Portugal. By my account, I have England progressing through that one. Next up, we have top of Group F versus third in Group B, France versus Russia. I have France winning that one. Second in Group D versus second in Group E, Croatia versus Sweden. I have Croatia progressing from that one. Next up, we have top of Group C versus third in Group F, which is Netherlands versus Germany. A very tasty fixture in there, and I have Netherlands progressing through that stage of the tournament. And finally, then we have the runners-up of Group A taking on the runners-up of Group B, which is Turkey versus Denmark. I have Turkey winning that, although it'll probably be quite a tight one, that one. Probably one of the more interesting games to watch tactically in the tournament. Next, we're moving into the quarterfinals, kicking things off with Belgium v Italy. I have Belgium winning that one. Be a tight game, though. Italy will definitely give them a good game. France versus Croatia is next. I have France winning that, probably quite comfortably. Probably a similar game to the one in the World Cup final a few years ago. Next up, we have Spain versus England. Possibly the tightest one here to call. I was going to say initially England, then I wanted Spain. I'm going to say England because I'm obviously English. I'm an England fan. But I wouldn't be surprised if Spain won this one if this was the way it went. This is probably one of the more knife-edge games that I think is probably going to be won by an individual moment in the game. And finally, we have Netherlands taking on Turkey, Dutch progressing from that one. Although Turkey giving themselves a good account, I think they'll definitely be the dark horse. You know, every tournament has a team that does really well. I think Turkey is going to be the one in this one. That then leaves us with the semi-finals. 4 teams left in the tournament. I have firstly got France versus Belgium, and I have France progressing through, of course, a replay from the semi-finals from the World Cup in 2018. Again, I have France probably winning, probably in a similar situation. I think it was Umtiti who got the goal from like a corner last time. Either being something similar to that, probably a set-piece goal, or a, you know, an individual moment, much like the England versus Spain game in the last stages. And then England versus Netherlands in the semi-finals. I was going to go for Netherlands initially, but then I realised Frank de Boer's the manager, so I'm not saying Gareth Southgate's much better, because he probably isn't, but I'm going to go for England to progress through to the final. Am I being biased? Probably. I'm being a little bit biased. I have England, though, progressing through to the semi-finals, which means my European Championships 2021 final is France versus England, and I have France winning this probably quite comfortably, if I'm being honest. I think England making it to the final. I think a good tournament for England for me would be reaching like the semis, I would say. So reaching the final would obviously be great. I don't see us being anywhere near contending with France at the moment. Maybe next World Cup when we've got another year under our belts and players like Bellingham, Sancho, Rashford, Declan Rice coming in after another year of good top flight football. Obviously that would be great to see, but if England can make it to the final, that'd be great. And if we get hammered by France in the final, I'll take that. But I do have France as my winners of Euro 2021. Likely probably seeing player of the tournament being someone like Romelu Lukaku or N'Golo Kante, someone like that. But that does wrap up my predictions for Euro 2020/2021, depending again on which version you are wanting to go with. If you did enjoy it, please don't forget to drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel. Let me know your predictions for the European Championship starting on Friday in the comments section down below as well. Hopefully going to be looking at getting some videos out during the period. I can't make any promises. It's going to be down to how much time I've got available to me over the next few weeks, but I would like to hopefully get maybe a couple of videos out, just sort of maybe wrapping up the group stages and then the knockouts or something as we head towards the final, something like that. If you want to follow me on social media, by the way, my Twitter and Instagram handle is MaxDJ Goodwin for both. That'll be a good place to maybe find out my thoughts on the European Championships as they unfold, and also when new videos are going live. Again, thanks for helping me reach 100 subscribers. Hopefully this wasn't too disjointed a video. Hopefully you were able to keep track. Hopefully my graphic helped with that. That being said though, thanks again for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll catch you later.